Hey everyone. So, this episode for me really hammered home how much of a silent tragedy Kuma's life really was. Like, he committed so much to the idea of finding a cure for Bonnie and protecting the people of Sorbet Kingdom that in the end it all led him to finding Vegapunk, which in any other scenario would have been a godsend. And it still is because it saved Bonnie's life. But the tragic reality is that in finding Vegapunk, Kuma also landed himself in the clutches of J. Garcia Saturn. How, in choosing to save Bonnie's life, give her a chance to live her life free of hardship and disease and whatnot, he's ultimately going to make the ultimate sacrifice for her, which is to give up his own freedom, his own autonomy, his own life for her sake. And absolutely no one other than Bonnie and those of Sorbet Kingdom are going to know of the sacrifice he made. Like a life, like it's basically a life for a life, as they say. And it's interesting how Kuma's story started as a slave, and in a way it's going to end as a slave as well by becoming a pacifista. But in Kuma's eyes, he's not going to see it that way, because for as much as his humanity will erode through the process, he'll be taking solace in the fact that he could at least save Bonnie's life. That's the only thing he ever wanted. And I know I said Kuma's life was a silent tragedy, but his legacy is one of absolute self-sacrifice and love, always putting others before himself, never once giving up on people he loves, or or just in general choosing to shoulder the burden of protecting them. And I think that's always been the one miscalculation Saturn always made about Kuma, is the reason behind his choice, behind his decisions. Like Saturn is always one who thinks in meticulous absolutes. He never understands he's the irony is, despite being ahead of the government, he never understands he's never understood humanity or any reason they fight. Whereas in Kuma, he fights for all the reasons you expect one to fight for the things they love. Also, real quick, if I did have a problem with this episode, though, it would be that the preview teases were going to be getting the basically usual clip show filler episode next week, and admittedly, this is the one time it does feel like the most jarring, as we're kind of interrupting the tempo of this flashback, in my opinion. Now, in saying that, this episode also covers what are essentially the events that led to Kuma becoming the Tyrant, which pretty much Makuri essentially pulling a go at Kingdom and trying to just outright eliminate the people who live on the south side of the island. As on top of, even when he does get ousted, he comes back with an armada of the Navy, and it's like, yeah, that gets blasted too. And I'm going to say it, whether it's the Japanese or English voice actors, it's got to be the most thankless job on the planet to voice a piece of shit villains like Bakuri. Like, I know many voice actors talk about how much fun it is to play villains, and to an extent they are right, but I think that really only applies when it comes to playing characters like, say, Crocodile, Doflamingo, Rob Lucci, characters like that, characters who are villains, but you can tell that there is a fun to them, and as well as a bit of a depth to them as well. But when you're stuck playing an absolute 100% slimy piece of shit like Bakuri, you would have to know going in people are just gonna fucking hate and spite a character like this, and only find enjoyment when they basically get their well-deserved asses handed to them. Like, and I imagine a lot of voice actors know that going into it and pray just as equally for this character's downfall, but it's like, yeah, it's got to be thankless to play villains like McCurry. Like, it's one thing to play characters, the fun villains, but then you got villains like this guy who's like fucking pieces of shit outright. With that said, the fall of Bakuri gave rise to Kuma as king, although in some ways his tenure was strange, as even though he was the real king of Sorbet, it was actually Bulldog and his mother Connie who were the officially recognized as the new royalty. And yeah, it's one of those things where you can understand why he would probably step down out of the public light because of what he did. But Connie herself also Connie's role in the story also explains a bit of why why Bonnie had transformed into her at Marie Joie. It's a way of showing her respect for someone who is not only the new royalty of Sorbet, who were much nicer than Bakuri was, but also but also someone who genuinely cared for Bonnie. When pretty much pretty much Kuma was out there trying to find a way to save her. Like when Kuma couldn't be there for her, Connie was, and in a way that shows like that in a way that does bring light to why Bonnie assumed that form of Rejois, because she basically has so much respect for Connie for being there for her. And honestly, the one thing I'm surprised about is Bakuri was even alive after Kuma's rampage in order to spread the word of Tyrant Kuma, because yeah, being blasted but basically condensed air bubbles in the way he was, condensed air bubble in the way he was, that should have fucking killed the bastard. But I guess evil just keeps living on, don't it? With that said, this episode also gave us a glimpse into Bonnie's first use of her Delpher powers. And for those asking, wait, when did she get her powers? We didn't see her to Delphrut. And once again, this is another in the long list of just absolutely unethical, you could say unethical experiments Jay Garcia has done. Like, I'll let him explain it fully when the time comes, but let's just say Vegapunk wasn't the only one experimenting with Delphrut. Jay Garcia dipped his fingers in that pool as well. It's just, in this case, you could argue less humane, to put it simply. Like Jay Garcia basically used methods of in vitro in order to give Bonnie her powers when she was born. Like, man literally liquefied a devil fruit and basically stuck a needle into an infant's bloodstream. So yeah, pretty fucked up. And Oda, to his credit, I guess, fucked up credit, really made us hate Jack Garcia in all the ways we should. Like, man makes his namesake as the warrior of God and justice and defense to the and takes that title to the absolute worst extremes imaginable. Like, the man is the little definition of every which way that science can be used and abused. Also, now, one interesting thing, though, while we see Kuma on his journey, is we also get a brief but nice reunion between Kuma and the revolutionaries, where a younger Bello Betty asks Kuma if she could replace him as the new captain of the Eastern Forces, and when Kuma asks why she's asking him, we learn it was Dragon's rule. No one replaces Kuma without his permission, and it shows just without Kuma's permission specifically, and it shows just how much respect Dragon has for Kuma. Like, he genuinely sees him as an irreplaceable comrade, whether he's part of the revolutionaries or not, which is something we've always known, but we see the extent of just how deep that relationship goes in this episode, even to the point of Dragon pointing him in Vegapunk's direction. Like, it shows how connected these three characters kind of are. It's also interesting to see how when Kuma and Vegapunk do meet for the first time, it's interesting to see how the Pacifista project began as something Vegapunk had genuinely good intentions with their creation, and using Kuma as a base. But as we learn, that went down the worst possible route it could have gone. And I think this episode also exposes Vegapunk's biggest flaw, and how I think he was too trusting in some ways. Like, I think to some extent I think Vegapunk knew he was being watched by the government, but simultaneously I don't think he expected Saturn to be keeping as close a watch on his actions as he was. At least not until pretty much later, after this point, where he started to become a lot more wary of the government's actions, just how much they're surveilling him. Like, a lot of what happened with Kuma, it did kind of cause Vegapunk to become much more cautious and wonder, how much, and become more cautious of the government's, like, how much the government is keeping an eye on him. Basically, I think he became much more cautious later in life because of this event, you could say. But yeah, guys, that's pretty much all I got for this review. If you enjoyed the video, like, comment, subscribe. If you enjoyed, follow me on Blue Sky, NLS Crunchyroll, bitch notification bell, subscribe button, and just shove it around, guys. Dark Knight of Everything, signing off. Later, everyone.